Hello guys, how you doing? I'd like to thank Pastor Woodall for inviting me to be a part of this program with you guys. As far as community involvement, I think it's great to have something like this going on to help the parents and students and just all stakeholders involved with the educational process of the students in this pandemic. Pandemic has caused many issues for several different people, families. Everybody has different situations. It has affected everyone, regardless of income or color or whatever it is. I mean, this has been something that has over 170,000 people have died. So I'm just here to try to help provide some insight and details on ways that we can all work together to come up and strategize and just be positive through this. And I'm Dr. Fred Abernathy. I like to have a visual when I talk because some people are auditory and some are visual. So, and I'm sure it's going to be all grades and age levels as you're talking. So, and I just have a little picture here telling you, hey, hello, I'm Dr. Fred Abernathy. I'm assistant principal from Decatur High School, and I've included some things here to help us sort of guide us as we go through the process here today. First thing I want to say is be patient. Being patient through this pandemic. Like I said, we all, like right now here at the school setting that we have parents and students who want blended, virtual, traditional, and so you have a lot of schedule changes and everybody wants them done right there at the snap of a finger, so it's one of those things where you have to be patient and know that things are getting done, and it sort of goes to what what people are talking about, different packages to help families and things like that. So you have different debates on things and some of the funding and monies that families are wanting to help them through this process are not coming in. Then you have essential workers who are going out in the front lines every day. So there's a lot of things that are taking place and people are doing things, but I just think we need to be patient and slow down and sort of help out each other through this process. The next thing I want to say is being flexible. That sort of goes back hand to what some of the things I said. Here I'm gonna give you another example. Here in the school, we just have different schedules that we have to put in to make sure we're following CDC guidelines. You have to be flexible. You have to accommodate going into. You see it going to different stores or even drive-throughs that you go through to get your meals in now, because some places still have it where you can't eat inside. So you have to be flexible through this. That's even when you emailing teachers and things like that. They're not going to get right back with you if you email and today at 3. You're not going to get an email back at 3:10. So you have to be flexible through the process. Self-reflect. I always try to self-reflect, and what I mean by self-reflect is you going in and you reading a book, some type of exercise or whatever it is that you'd like to do, and just meditating about your day-to-day on ways that you can improve and better help and better serve people. Because, as I said, we are in the middle of a pandemic, and the unfortunate part and sad part about this is a lot of people have died through this, and I think we as a society has become immune to this. And when we hear death, I just told you the death number, over 170,000 people have died, and I mean that's one death is too many, but think about it, 170,000 people have died through this, and they're saying 300,000 are going to die by December. So the thing is, we have to be patient, we have to be flexible, self-reflect on ways that we can just take it slow and put our health and safety at the top, because that's the number one thing that we want to take care of at this point. You want to make sure. I have a mask here, but I have it off because I'm talking, but you want to make sure you have your mask and things like that, gloves, sanitizer, wash your hands, and make sure you're following all that process to help you through this. And self-reflecting just comes into play from the emotional component, the mental state of mind, which is very important here. And that's why you want to do something that you enjoy that you can do without others being around you, because you want to have that release of anxiety or stress or pressure or whatever that is. So I like to say self-reflect. That way you get that clearance of the mind. The next component that I like to say is help. Make sure you help people. This is, we're talking about servantship, being collaborative, helping others through this process. This is what it's all about. You have to do these things because that's the right thing to do. That's the only thing to do in order for us to get through this. And that's helping. I'm wearing my mask. I'm helping myself out. I'm helping the person that I'm talking to, helping them out, and they're wearing theirs. They're doing the same. So it's like an effect, ripple effect. It's going down, down, down. It's going down from one person to another one. So everybody's helping each other in that aspect. If you know somebody who's in need or who needs something, some type of food or personal items that you can help them with, if you have the means to do that, then do it. Because like I said earlier, a lot of families are dependent on things from the government, and we're not getting all the things that you need. It's like a tug of war to get those things. I like to say it's like trying to cut grass with scissors to get those things. So, you got to be patient, flexible, self-reflect, and help out during this time. Those doing these things are the only way we're going to get through it. Encourage yourself. Encourage yourself to keep going, keep moving, be positive. Although we're going through this, it's you're going out as students. You're trying to go out and you're trying to reach out to your teachers. Ways you can reach out to them via phone, email. Some of your teachers have given you. Some of them give you cell numbers that you can text them and things like that. That's great. But you have different forms of communication that you can go through and communicate with them. But the main thing is you want to encourage yourself and keep saying, you want to keep it moving. You don't want to have anything that's going to hold you back during this time as far as you getting your lesson and things like that. Some of you may be going virtual, some of you may be blended, or some of you traditional. So you have 3 different pathways that you can still do things you need to do as a student so that you are successful and managing and doing things you need to do on a day-to-day basis. And if you need that help or your assistance, you can always get in and get with your teachers, administrators, counselors, other people in the school setting to help you out to get you what you need through this process. Another thing, some schools have to help you out as far as some of the things we talked about, not necessarily in this component of encourage yourself, but as far as them having different food programs and things like that. I know we have a food program here at Decatur High School that if you or your family need some help or need some food, need some assistance, go to the people who are over there and go discreetly. If you want to send an email to somebody and say, hey, I need this, it's ways around all that. It's nothing to be ashamed about during this time, because the thing is this, we all have needs. Regardless of who you all have needs. And so we all have to reach out and we have to help, which is one of the components that I had up. We all got to help out because we all have needs that need to be met. And the only way we're going to meet those needs is everybody's working hand in hand and supporting each other. But this one that I have here is communicate with others via phone, email. I talked about that earlier. So this is more or less for the students. You reach out to your teachers. Some of you may be on different grade levels. The thing is now all students, elementary school to middle school to high school have Chromebooks and different things that you can go out and you can email. So you're learning at a younger age, you elementary people, you're learning how to go through that process and send an email. And when you do that, make sure everything's in full sentences and you're not texting. But the main thing is, rule of thumb with an email is always to make sure that you're sending it out correctly, but also being patient and let the other person respond. That goes back to the example I said earlier. When you send an email, it's not going to be an efficient point where you getting it. If I send it at 9:45, I'm not, they're not going to hit me back with another email by 10:15. Some people will, but rule of thumb is 2 days. That's what I like to tell people. 2 days, rule of thumb for an email to return. Other people have things going on. They're they're teaching. They have, they have real personal lives that they go through. Like I said earlier, we are in a pandemic, so they may be quarantining. They could be helping people, but it goes back to you being accommodating, being flexible through your day-to-day process. But I always like to say a rule of thumb: if you give everybody anywhere from a good 48 hours, a good 24 to 48 hours to respond to your email, that's good. But if they haven't responded in 48 hours, then I would hit back another email or do a phone call. And the other thing is about texting and emailing. Sometimes you can get a quicker response by simply picking up a phone and calling. That way you can get what you need versus, you guys sending 5-6 texts over a span of 2 or 3 hours because the person not texting you back or emailing you back in enough time that you think they should be. Okay. That goes back to this one. Allow teachers 2 days back to a response. So I sort of covered that previously. So, I don't want to beat that down, but like I said, 2 days for their response. Here, like I said earlier, this is a new situation for all of us. You want to be positive, help someone, contact people, read a book, exercise, or do what it is to get your outlet. So all these things are important because, as I said earlier, this is a new process, the new normal for the time being, and the only way we're going to get through this is us working together hand by hand and being as one unit. I like to say is we, not me. So when you have that we, not me attitude, that we, not me mind frame, then we can all work together collaboratively to get things done. But like I said, I like to thank again Pastor Woodward for calling me and asking me to be a part of this. Anything I can do to help you guys out, or if you guys need anything, you can contact me here at Decatur High School. Once again, Dr. Fred Abernathy, I'm assistant principal. And you guys have a great day. Be safe. Wear a mask. Wash your hands. Sanitize your hands. And follow the CDC guidelines. Thank you guys and have a blessed day.
First, let me say what a privilege it is to be a part of the 2020 virtual Back to School Bible Conference. I want to thank my friend, Pastor Dalen Woodall of First Missionary Baptist Church in Decatur, for extending me this opportunity to share with parents and with students as you all prepare for a successful school year. So I want to thank you, Pastor Woodall. I pray that much fruit is born from this effort and the efforts of all of those who have joined with Pastor Woodall and First Missionary Baptist in order to carry out this conference. So thank you so much, New Eden. Thank you all so much for serving the Lord's people in this capacity. I do want to share a message with you all to close out this virtual Bible conference from the Gospel of Luke, Luke chapter 2, verses 39 and 40. And I want to read those two verses, and they state, "And when they had performed everything according to the law of the Lord, they returned into Galilee to their own town of Nazareth. And the child grew and became strong, filled with wisdom, and the favor of God was upon him." Briefly, I want to title this message, "Devotion Determines Direction." I think that's an important principle for us to grasp, in that our devotion, what we're dedicated to, committed to, determines not only the direction of our own spiritual lives, but it influences the trajectory of the spiritual lives of our children and everyone in whom we come in contact with. I think while practicing spiritual disciplines and galvanizing our relationship with the Lord is especially helpful for us, it's a good investment for our own spiritual lives, for our own walk with Christ. But I think we have to remember that at the same time, that time that we spend in devotion with God, that time that we spend pursuing God's will and pursuing peace and satisfaction in Christ and Him alone, that time that we spend in following Jesus Christ, not only is an investment into our own spiritual lives, but that investment will leave an impression in the lives of all of those in whom we come in contact with. I think devotion is making the pursuit of Christ the most important pursuit of our daily lives. You know, we have this idea of devotion. When we hear the word devotion, typically many of us would think of the song and the prayer led by the deacons to begin or commence a worship service. And we think about how those deacons would line those hymns, and we think about how some of those old deacons would sing those songs and stir the church spiritually prior to the service ever beginning. And that is a type of devotion. That's a devotional service. But the type of devotion here that I particularly want to focus in on is the type of devotion that is marked by being devoted and committed to following Jesus Christ. Devotion is committing to following the Lord through willful submission to what He has already said. Devotion is a wholehearted commitment to God. Devotion is loving the Lord thy God with all thy heart, with all thy mind, and with all thy soul. Devotion is following Christ even in those difficult moments. Devotion is trusting God even when we can't trace God. Devotion is putting our faith in God so much so that we will follow His will even when it does not seem beneficial for us. Devotion is picking up our cross and carrying it daily. Devotion is forsaking thyself, some of the pleasures that this world has to offer, in pursuit of what is on the other side. Devotion is about what we do, not necessarily what we say. And it's that devotion that will leave a major impression on all of those whom we come in contact with, and especially on our children. You know, we spend the most time around those people who we raise, those people who we feed, those people who we clothe, those people who we have to whoop and correct sometimes, those people who we find ourselves deeply frustrated with. We will leave the biggest impression on those people whom God has given us to be our children. And I have not yet experienced the joy or the burden of being a parent, but I do know that being a parent is one of the most blessed privileges that this life has to offer. But I think that for many of us, the problem is that we view our spiritual devotion, our Christian lives, we view our own personal discipleship and walk with Christ as independent and exclusive, when in reality that our devotion to Christ, our relationship with Christ, not only has an implication on our own spiritual lives, but it affects the spiritual lives of those who are following us and those who are watching us. The issue is that we tend to view our spiritual lives as separate and distinct from the lives of those whom we spend our time with. But this is certainly not so. And if it had been so, Paul would have never written to the church of Galatia that a little leaven leavens the whole lump. We see how our spiritual lives have an impact and effect on the spiritual lives of those around us. The truth is that much of what we learn as Christians, as believers, especially when we are children, is caught and not taught. Matter of fact, in Ephesians 5:1, Paul tells us, therefore be imitators of God as beloved children. Much of what we learn as children doesn't come from a textbook, doesn't come from a planned curriculum, does not come from a Sunday school book. Much of what we learn as children, although textbooks and Sunday school are helpful, much of what we learn will come from imitating those whom we admire and those whom we spend our time with. That's why this notion of devotion is such an important component when it comes to discipleship, because I think we all have to remember that devotion is about what we do. Devotion is about action. Devotion, or discipleship rather, is the purest form. In its purest form is about what we do. Discipleship in its purest form is about what we do. Disciples follow. And he said to all of them, go ye therefore and to all the lands and make disciples, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all that I have commanded you. And behold, I am with you always, even to the end of the day. Discipleship is about leading, but discipleship is also about following. He says, and he said to all of them, anyone would come after me, let him deny himself, take up his cross daily and follow me. Action defines us as disciples. We can't truly be disciples without imitating Jesus. That is the action that will truly define us or makes us disciples and makes us distinct from the rest of the world. We can't disciple other people without giving them something to imitate. I have not yet, again, experienced the inexplicable joy and the burden of parenting, but I do know the question that many parents are seeking to answer, and that question is, what can I do to ensure that my child is successful? Well, that term success is relative, and since I'm speaking to Christians and we're in a Bible conference, I'm going to assume that by success you mean that you want your children to grow into godly adults whose lives bear much spiritual fruit. If by successful you mean raising young men and young women that represent Christ well and represent the body of Christ well, if you believe that success is defined by how faithful we are to the Word of God and how committed we are to God and how much compassion and love we have for Christ and our fellow man, if that's what you mean by success, then I think the Gospel of Luke, especially in Luke chapter 2, verses 39 and 40, offers us some insight as to how we can raise successful children. The answer ends with fruitful and faithful children, but I think we have to remember that it begins with devoted and committed adults. I think there are three things that Paul helps us to understand, Luke helps us to understand in terms of what it means to have our own spiritual lives, what it means for our devotion to impact the trajectory, the spiritual trajectory of our children and those whom we disciple. Luke helps us to understand with these two verses just how important it is that we set a godly example. And not only that we set a godly example, in that our priorities will show those around us what should be important. Number one, I think we see the dedication of Jesus' parents. Dedication is probably the most important characteristic of Jesus' parents, Mary and Joseph. These two verses, verses 39 and 40 in chapter 2, construct a passage all in themselves. And we find ourselves in a transition between two scenes. One scene where we have a 40-day-old Jesus, and the next scene where we have a 12-year-old Jesus. In both settings, what Jesus' parents witnessed and what others witnessed of the boy Jesus or the child Jesus really astonished and astounded many of them. At 40 days old, Mary and Joseph took Jesus up to the temple according to the law of Moses to dedicate him. And they were following at that time what the law of Moses had stated about giving the firstborn son to the Lord. Mary and Joseph were two devout individuals. They believed in following the word of God and submitting willfully to the law of the Lord. They believed in doing exactly what God had commissioned them to do. It was a dedication that's important. And I want us to think about this, that much of these first few chapters in the gospel, according to Luke, focus on Jesus before his birth and after his birth, in his childhood and adolescent years. Much of what Luke writes in these first couple of chapters talks about Jesus' conception, his birth, and then his early years as a child. Much of what is written here describes the lives and the impact and the roles of those people who would have a significant role to play in Jesus' life. For instance, we have John, who was conceived around the same time as Jesus. We have Jesus' parents, Mary and Joseph. We have Elizabeth, who would give birth to John the Baptist. We have all of these characters who are described in the first couple of chapters of Luke. And it's important that Luke writes about these characters before he begins to write about Jesus. And we see something in that our environment, those people around us, will have great influence on our stories. Jesus, although he was born the Messiah and he was sent to be the Redeemer of Israel, others in Jesus' life had an important role to play, not only in bringing salvation to the Jews and to the Gentiles, but also in preparing them for the boy Jesus. And so even Jesus, although he was the God-man, fully God and fully man, Jesus needed supporting characters in this story. Now, two of the most important characters right here in verses 39 and 40 are that of Mary and Joseph. Now, if Jesus, who was God's only son, needed strong parenting or good parenting, if Jesus needed that type of support and infrastructure on his way to the cross and on his way back to heaven, if Jesus needed that kind of support, we must ask ourselves, what kind of support do our children need? Luke writes about these two instances, really. The instance where Mary and Joseph take Jesus up to the temple at 40 days old, and then again he writes about their return to the temple at the age of 12, in which the boy Jesus was left behind to really impress upon the teachers and the scholars in the temple. Writes about these two things, and he includes Jesus' parents just to help us to understand how important their roles were in Jesus' life. Now, it is absolutely possible that God could have accomplished his will without Mary and Joseph. But the point is that God decided to include them in his plan to bring redemption. That's important for us as leaders, as parents, as teachers, as pastors. It's important for us to understand the role that we play in a child's life is very significant. And so Luke includes Mary and Joseph, and he describes them. He gives these details to help us to understand that these two individuals are examples. These are the types of people, or the types of parents that we should model our lives after. And they did such a great job with Jesus. Their dedication, their commitment, their devotion to God, all of those things led to some very special moments, not only in their lives, but in the lives of Jesus as well, and in the lives of others. For instance, we see with Simeon, and we see with the prophetess Anna. Both of those individuals had been awaiting the long-awaited Messiah. And they lived to see prophecy fulfilled. Why? Because Mary and Joseph were obedient to the word of God and had Jesus where Jesus was supposed to be when Jesus was supposed to be there. Mary and Joseph were able to experience something, and I think in Luke 2:33, it tells us that they marveled at what Simeon had said about their son Jesus. And what Simeon had said about Jesus was so much more profound and so much more substantial than what many of us long to hear people say about our children. Many of us long to hear our children described as Division I athletes. Many of us would love to hear our children being described as the next phenom. Many of us would love to hear our children as being described as the next nuclear biochemist. But Simeon described Jesus in a much different manner, in a way that would impact the entire world, that would bring about the salvation that the Jews had been waiting for. And can you imagine, as a parent, how it would feel to hear your son, your child, your only child described as being the Savior of the whole world? Well, there's only one Savior. There's only one Christ. And so I'm afraid that we've missed out on that opportunity. But thanks be unto God that this example shows us that when we seek God's will, when we obey God's will, it is quite possible for us to experience the revelation of God's will for the lives of our children. You know, we spend so much time investing in our children's lives. We spend so much time helping our children plan their futures, or we spend so much time planning their futures for them that we forget, or we get off course ourselves. We spend so much time investing in making sure our children start out on the right path, stay on the right path. We spend so much time trying to help our children find their path or to pave their path for them that we get off path ourselves. And for Mary and Joseph, this was not the case. They were so devoted and dedicated to the will of God. All they simply did was follow what God had said in his word. And it's ironic how by submitting to God's will and following God's will, we find God's will revealed. It's amazing for us who spend so much time trying to find purpose, trying to find our path in life, trying to find our niche, trying to find what God would have for us, trying to find all of these things, not only for ourselves, but for our children as well, and trying to impress upon them things that we think that they may enjoy, that may give them fulfilling lives, things that may lead to a financial security. We spend a lot of time investing in all of those things, when in reality, we lose ourselves and we forget to invest in our own spiritual lives. And we see that as parents and as leaders, the time that we spend in pursuit of God's will only benefit those whom we are discipling, or those who we are charged to care for. And so it was the dedication of Mary and Joseph that led to the revelation of what Jesus Christ had been born to do. If you think about how much time we spend putting our children in the wrong places, and how many opportunities we may have missed to really find out what God has planned for this young man or this young woman. Oftentimes we become so consumed with helping our children find their path that we get off path ourselves. And as our children grow, it's important for us to commit to following God's will for our own lives so that we may help our children understand his will for theirs. So number one, we see the dedication of Mary and Joseph. But then secondly, I want to point out, we notice the maturation of the boy Jesus Christ. Now, the text says in verse 40, and the child grew. I think that's important, but I have to make a distinction. And the child grew. All children grow, but all children do not mature. We sometimes arrogantly think that time will make us better or wiser or stronger. We mistakenly think sometimes that time is our friend, but time is really not our friend. Time is indifferent, and it is what we do with our time that becomes the determinant. Ephesians 5:16 tells us that making the best use of time, because the days are evil. Time does not make us better. It's what we do with our time that will make us better. We see a transition. This verse, or these two verses, really represent a transition between, like I said before, the 40-day-old Jesus and the 12-year-old Jesus. And in both instances, the boy Jesus was a very impressive individual. However, had Jesus possessed the same amount of wisdom, strength, and ability at 12 years old that he possessed at 40 days old, there wouldn't have been much to speak of in the temple. If Jesus had not matured beyond what he possessed as an infant, then there would not be much to talk about in terms of what we heard about Jesus in the temple at 12 years old. So Jesus not only grew in stature, not only grew physically, not only grew, he not only grew in strength and in stature, Jesus matured with wisdom and insight, spiritual wisdom. And Jesus was the beneficiary of having two parents who were very dedicated to God, very committed to God, and as a byproduct of his parents' dedication and devotion, Jesus didn't just grow as a child. Jesus matured. You know, oftentimes we make excuses for our children, and we love to say that they'll grow out of it. Truth be told, there are some things that our children will grow out of, but there are some things that our children will never grow out of because we have not invested in them. We have not poured into them. We have not modeled for them the correct behaviors or behaviors that would help them to grow out of whatever it is. Many of our children are simply a reflection of where we are in our own spiritual lives. And it is unfair for us to expect or assume that they will transcend where we are in our own spiritual lives. It's unfair for us to believe that although we are not faithful and committed to the church, that our children will somehow develop a love and passion for serving the Lord in the church. It's unfair for us to think that somehow our children will commit to a daily Bible reading plan if they never see us picking up our Bibles and reading it. It's unfair to expect our children to take worship seriously when we approach worship so haphazardly. It's unfair for us to expect our children to outgrow some of our bad habits and poor behaviors if we never model for them corrected behaviors or habits. Jesus didn't just grow, Jesus matured, and he matured in such a way that people took notice of his wisdom. People took notice of his insight. People took notice of his intellect. And yes, Jesus was fully God, but Jesus was also a man. He was fully man. Jesus came to us by birth through a virgin named Mary. Now, his conception was spectacular, but Jesus shared with us the process of growing, the process of maturing, the process of developing over time. Jesus did not come to us packaged as a fully grown man. Jesus came wrapped in swaddling cloth, laid in a manger as a baby boy, and that boy Jesus matured into something that this world will never see again. But in all of that, we have to take notice of how Jesus matured, how Jesus grew. Jesus matured, Jesus grew by being surrounded by parents who love the Lord. Not just physically. Jesus, as long as he would be fed, would grow physically. As long as he received the proper nourishment, his body would grow. His genetics would determine, his muscular, his skeletal, his eye color, his hair color. Our children grow, and for the most part, all of that has been determined. Their height, their muscular structure, their skeletal structure, their voices, the smiles, the nose, the ears. All of these things have been determined by genetics. But there are some things that our children develop over time, not as a result of genetics, as a result of faithful discipleship. The difference between genetics and discipleship is that genetics are purely physical influences, but discipleship requires some spiritual influences. There are some things that we can develop into our children despite any deficiencies that we may have passed on. There are some things that we can pour into our children despite our lack of understanding and our lack of knowledge, simply by being dedicated to God. Jesus had parents that were dedicated. Their dedication was unique. Their dedication played a huge role in Jesus' maturation. But then finally, I want us to look at the characterization of the boy Jesus, because all of us want to end up with our children being characterized as godly, as faithful, as successful, as all of those things. I want you to hear again how Luke characterized this boy Jesus as he matured. And the child grew and became strong, filled with wisdom, and the favor of God was upon him. I believe that that's a healthy characterization, and that's a characterization that we would love to reserve for all of our children. And the child grew. This is the characterization. He became strong. He was filled with wisdom, and the favor of God was upon him. Many of us long to raise children, to raise young women and to raise young men into strong, wise, and adults who have the favor of God upon their lives. I don't think that there's anybody in the world who would reject that characterization of their children. But unfortunately, we are faced with the challenge of avoiding some negative characterizations of our children. Unfortunately, some of the more common characterizations of our children include thug, lazy, crazy, unorganized, undisciplined, selfish, spoiled. Those characterizations are characterizations that all of us would love to avoid for our children. And I want to tell you this, that this type of discipleship, this type of devotion to God is not a formula to ensure that you will raise successful children. However, what it is obedience to God in following God in all that we do and honoring God in all that we do. It's placing a focus on our own spiritual and personal lives in such a manner that it will have an impact on all of those whom we come in contact with. You know, all of us, we love lists. As Christians, we love lists. We love to check things off our list. We love to know that if we do this, and this, that this will happen. But Christianity is not about lists. It's about love. For Mary and Joseph, they loved their son, but they loved God. Their devotion to God was not their attempt to coerce God into blessing their son in a special way. No, their devotion to God was purely out of their love for God. And their love for God birthed a baby boy who would be characterized as strong, as wise, and who possessed the favor of God. And I think that that's the most encouraging bit of advice that all of us can get this evening, in that if you want to raise children who are characterized as the boy Jesus was characterized, you don't have to try to coerce God. The only thing you have to do is to love God. If you love God, you will be dedicated and devoted to God. And it's your devotion that will impact the trajectory of your children's success. You know, our devotion to Jesus is the most natural and practical form of discipleship that we can ever engage in. Our devotion to Jesus is birthed out of our love for what he has done for us and what he continues to do for us. Our devotion, our commitment to following Christ and to imitating Christ is birthed out of this deep sense of debt that we owe to Christ for paying a debt that we could not pay for ourselves. And I'm excited to announce to you that it is that devotion that will have a deep impact on your children. I would encourage you to put most emphasis on your own personal spiritual lives. I would encourage you to spend as much time cultivating and galvanizing your relationship with Jesus Christ as you do training your children to be professional athletes, to be scientists, to be lawyers, and to be doctors. My appeal to you would be to mimic Mary and Joseph and making sure that you put your children in position to understand what the will of God is for their lives. And my appeal to you would also be to remember that it is your devotion to God that will determine the direction for our children.